other. Asli mikdash ושכנתי בתוכם, they shall make for him mikdash, and I will dwell amongst them. And my father-in-law, in other words, the Friedrich Rebbe, analyzes this in his Maimer on this title from the year Tafshin Dalet. The Tzarech Lahav Naimroi, we need to understand what he says. V'asul li mikdash lashon yachid. He begins saying, they shall make for me a mikdash in the singular. Im kein ma'u oimroi ושכנתי בתוכם lashon rabim. Why does it say that I shall dwell amongst them in the plural? Why does it say, it should have said, since it doesn't say Vasili Mikdash Shois in the plural, it says Mikdash in the singular. So why is it V'shכנתי בתוכם instead of B'soichai in it in the singular? It should have just said, and they shall make a mikdash. Va'asu mikdash. Why does it say va'asu li mikdash? Maybe Masham Razal, the Friedrich Rebbe in his Maimer brings what the Chazal say. Kol makom shenemar li ein azaz la'olam. Wherever it uses the term li, it never moves. And there are different examples that the Chazal bring, as I mentioned in the previous Maimer. Loi ba'olam hazav v'loi ba'olam haba. Not in this world, and not in the world to come. And one of the things, when the Chazal go through a whole list of things that are ongoing and everlasting, because it says li, and one of the things is he enumerates the Beis HaMikdash, and he brings the proof. Shenamar, as it says, chulu v'asli mikdash, they shall make for me a mikdash. And the Friedrich Rebbe analyzes over in that Maimer, and the Tzarech Lahav, when you understand. Now, in the time of exile, the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. How do we say that doesn't move? Not in this world, not in the world to come. And the Friedrich Rebbe explains in his Maimer, the Mashkos of Vasli Mikdash, where it says, they shall make for me a Mikdash. I know it's referring to the Chol Yisrael Tzar Tzrichim Lasis as HaMikdash. Every single Yid needs to make the Mikdash. What is a Mikdash? Shumakim l'shchinas uzi yizbarach. It's a place for the resting of his might of Hashem. Mikdash hazem, and this Mikdash who bayis kedusha or bayis kedusha, it's a holy home, a holy house, belibay shel adam, in the heart of a person. And that's why that's why there's the famous explanation the Chazal bring down that why does it say ושכנתי בתוכם in the plural? I shall dwell amongst them, meaning within each and every Yid there is this dwelling, this holy place for Hashem. The main intention is that a person should be a sanctuary. A place that's set for his settlement, for his living. That godliness should dwell in the person's soul in a revealed way. The inyan ein zaz la'olam sheb'migdash kipshutai mashma sham b'maimer sham shegam tchilas hasiyah hu ba'ofen ein zaz la'olam. When we say in the literal Mikdash, not the Beis HaMikdash that we're talking about in everyone's heart, but in the literal Beis HaMikdash, it indicates, seems to say, that already at the beginning of its being made is in such a way that it's never moving. In other words, the nature of something being everlasting is not like at the end of its run, that you don't see an end to it. But when you say that something is everlasting, that's an everlasting state right away at the beginning. It says, V'asu li mikdash. That right away when it's asu, right away when it's made, it's in a way of li, it's in a way that's everlasting, that change doesn't apply. So the Rebbe says in a similar vein, when we're talking about our personal, internal Beis HaMikdash, v'al derech zeh muven gam ba'avodas kol echad ve'echad. So too it's understood in each and every one service of Hashem. The aim is the fact that a person's service has to be in such a manner that it never moves. So it's not just out to describe the duration of how long his avodah lasts. In other words, instead of being 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, it is an everlasting, unchanging avodah. The intention over here is to describe the manner of his service, meaning his avodah, even initially, is so powerful that it never moves, and no change is possible. Just to use a simple explanation, you could say a person does his avodah, and then something challenging happens, and something difficult happens. And we say, he overcame that obstacle, because his avodah does not change when he meets up with an obstacle, and he keeps on doing what he has to do, despite the test, despite the challenge, despite the difficulty, whatever it is. But the Maimer is saying that initially the avodah is so powerful at the first state, meaning its quality, it's not just how long it lasts, but its quality is such that already in the first minute you could tell that nothing is going to stand in its way. So that's not just how long the avodah lasts, it is indicative of the strength, the type of avodah that the person is doing. Third paragraph on the page, the Maimer continues that the Chol Parot HaMadreges Shehoyu BeMikdash VaKelim VaYiris Shem Pnimis Makifim, all the specific levels that were in the Beis HaMikdash, in the vessels, in the curtains and coverings, that these are the levels of the inner levels and the transcendent levels. Just like the Yeriyos covered the Mishkan, was on top of the Mishkan, draped over the sides of the Mishkan. That's the level of the encompassing part of the Mishkan. And the vessels, that's the internal part of the Mishkan. So the same thing, Hakol Yeshnam Ba'adam Lamata, everything, all of these levels to be found by a person down here below. Through that he becomes a vessel that Hashem should rest in him in a revealed way, just like the Mishkan is a place where Hashem is revealed in, when the Mishkan is erected with all these different things of the Makifim and the Pnimim. The idea behind this is, like the Tzemach Tzedek explains in Derech Tzechom, while Derech Zehugam B'Mamorei Admorem Tzoy, in a similar vein is also Mamor with the Mittler Rebbe. The Iker Kavonas Asiyas HaMikdash, he Lias Gili Elokus B'Yisrael, the primary intention and purpose of the making of the Mikdash, the literal Beis HaMikdash, is the revelation of godliness amongst the Yid. That's why the Mikdash is supposed to reflect the order, how there is the revelation that comes all the way in the Seder Stalshlus, starting from Hashem's essence. The way the divine light and energy comes out from Hashem's essence. There are two general types of revelations. Hamshachas Oris Makifim, Hamshachas Oris Pnimim. They are transcendent lights and the drawing down of the internal lights. And Hashem wanted to have a home down there below that reflects and is similar to the beginning of the chain descent of revelation from Hashem's very essence. Therefore, Hashem commanded us to make the Mishkan in a manner that corresponds to these two types of Hamshachas. This means Hayiriyas v'akroshim shva mishkan, the curtains, the hides, and the boards that made up the walls of the Mishkan, Shem Dugmas Eres Makifim Al Yoinim, these correspond to the transcendent light, the encompassing lights of above. Va'kelim, and the vessels of the Mishkan, Shem K'mei B'chinas Eres Pnimim, they're like the internalized lights. Umishachara Beis HaMikdash, once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, so that doesn't mean that puts a stop to the revelation of these transcendent and internalized lights. A person can still draw down all of the above levels through his avodah. This means to say, top of page 517, that the person could draw down through his avodah the lights that were in the Beis HaMikdash and its vessels. Because also by the person in his soul, there's these curtains and there's these vessels. The curtains of his soul, since that's the level of the makifim, that's the avodah the person serves Hashem beyond intellect. The vessels of a soul, these are the inner types of service that's based on reason and knowledge and understanding. He continues over there in the Betacham, if we look in our parsha, first he starts off with talking about the different vessels, the different kelim that were in the Beis HaMikdash. Only after he speaks about the different kelim, then he goes on to speak about the actual building of the edifice, that you have to erect, the kroshim, the adonim, the yiriyas, etc., etc. But when it says how Betzalel made it, later on in the Vayakal Pikuda and so on. So it says that Betzalel made first, he made the outside, first he made the building, and then he made the vessels. It's known, the famous Maimer Chazal, when Moshe commanded the Bnei Yisrael to make the Aron for the Luchas, and make the different vessels, and to make the Mishkan, Amrle Betzalel, so Betzalel said, hold on. You got the order over here is a little bit difficult. The custom of a person is first he builds a house and a home, then he brings vessels into it. And you, Moshe Rabbeinu, said to make the vessels and then build a house. And Betzalel, in a respectful way, told Moshe Rabbeinu, perhaps the way Hashem told it to you was as follows. Not the way you said it. He didn't say it in that way, but again, he said it in a respectful manner. Maybe Hashem said it to you to make the Mishkan, and then he said the Aron and the Kelim. Amarle, so Moshe Rabbeinu answered Betzalel, that a play on his name, Betzalel, Betzel, Kel, HaYisov Yadaita. You were in the shadow of Hashem. In other words, you were hiding out over there when Hashem told me how to build a Mishkan, and you knew that first he wanted me to build the Mishkan and then the Kelim. The Tzemach Tzedek explains in the Betzalel Amar Loi. Betzalel told Moshe Rabbeinu, how do you do Abin Yiseder Ishtaltos Moyer and Sof? It's known, concerning the chain order of descent of the Oyer and Sof. First, the Makif came down, Soiv Kolam, and the Eagle Agodel, etc., etc., and then came down the Kav, Memalo Kolam, the Oyeris Pnimim. That's why Betzalel told Moshe, initially you have to make the curtains, which is the Makif, and afterwards you have to make the vessels, which are the Pnimim. And the Rebbe adds to what the Tzemach Tzedek says, we could add to this. This order of Makifim And then Pnimim is not just the weights and Seder Ishtalshus, but also in a person's service. The Hinin is Barleil was explained previously. The level of the curtains that's in the nefesh, that's the avodah that's beyond intellect. And the vessels that's in the soul, that's the inner avodah that's based on reason and intellect. And the order is in it. Initially, we have to begin with the avodah that's beyond reason. And only afterwards the avodah that's based on reason. Like we see in the avodah every single day. The beginning of the avodah of the day is by saying Moidani. The avodah is beyond reason. Because it's beyond reason, all are the same. There's no differentiations between this one is like that, or like in Torah learning, there's different types of levels of Torah learning, etc. And we say also that kein Zach kenish metame sein the Moida'ani von Yid. It's the core essence of every single Yid. And afterwards there's the inner avodah that's based on reason, meaning afterwards we say the 18 brachas of the morning brachas. Afterwards we say the bracha on the Torah. Afterwards comes Torah study, like we incorporate Torah study right away in the brachas. The Gadol Talmud Shemei V'dei Maisa, and the greatness of studies that brings to action. Shekol Zehu Avoidam Shal Pitam V'das. All of this the avodah that's based on reason. So already, even before we start davening, the Rebbe has found the avodah of Makifim, the Yiriyas, and then the avodah of the Pnimim, the Kelim. V'zel Vasli Mikdash ושכנתי בתוכם. This is where it says they shall make me a Mikdash, and I shall rest and dwell amongst them. The avodah zu dasiyas hamishkan yesh no tamid ba'avodas kol echad ve'echad. This avodah of building and making a mishkan is to be found constantly in the avodah of every single one. Like we said before, the Chazal, but the Chazal say b'soichel le'namer. It doesn't say I shall dwell in it, in the mishkan, ela b'soicham, but rather I shall dwell within them. B'soichel echad ve'echad, within each and every one. Okay, Mavur, Bar Maimer Tavshin Dalad, Shalom, like explained over there in that Maimer, the Frierdiker Rebbe of Tavshin Dalad, the Lefit Pirish Rashi, Lishmi, according to Rashi's explanation on where it says, V'yikchu li truma. So the Rashi explains, why does it say, V'yikchu li truma, what's the li? So it says, Lishmi, you should take truma for my sake. The koi al shem avaya. What's it mean? Lishmi al pichsidis, for the sake of my name. Which name is of Hashem? Of the 7 names that aren't erased, Elokim, Keil, Adnai. Which one is called Lishmi, my name? That's going on the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. Ani Havayu Shmi. There's an open passage that says, I am Havaya. That is Shmi. Why is that called Shmi? My name specifically, the Shem Havayu Shem Ha'etzem V'Shem HaMeforish V'Shem HaMiyuchad, because the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei is Hashem's essential name, an explicit name, and unique name. Because it is so identified with Hashem Himself, there are no changes. Therefore, when it says "V'asu li Mikdash," because it has to do with Hashem's name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's beyond any changes, because it's connected with Hashem Himself. It never moves without any change whatsoever. Now, here the Rebbe is going to explain a very interesting topic, which also we can understand from that the Rebbe's emphasis in this, that you don't see in earlier Mamorim of the previous Rebbeim, and the Rebbe emphasized this, and here the Rebbe explains why the need for emphasis and so on. What the Chazal said, it doesn't say in it, but in them, meaning within each and every one. Echad ve'echad is the masculine, so you might read it as only men, So the Rebbe says, no, read it as if it says, Kol echad va'achas, each and every one in the masculine and each and every one in the feminine, including women. Okay, move it, Maimer Toshin Dalad Shom. Like it's brought down to the conclusion of the Maimer of Toshin Dalad, the Chol Yisrael. All Yidden, Hanoshim, Vanoshim, Mechiyovim, Bebinyan HaMikdash are obligated in building the base HaMikdash. Val derech ze gam benidvus HaMishkan Ishtat Vanoshim, and similarly then in the Midbar, women also participated in donating to the Mishkan. Va'adraba va'yevoyu ha'anoshim al hanoshim ksiv, it says the men came in addition to the women, sha'anoshim nitfulu l'noshim, that the men were secondary and ancillary to the women, because the women overtook the men in giving donations to the Mishkan. V'gam bepirish Rashi shemefarish va'yevoyu ha'anoshim al hanoshim b'ifan acher, even according to Rashi, that gives a different explanation of why it says the men came over or upon the women. So he explains it differently than we just now explained. But we find it in a different thing concerning the giving of the Torah. Madgish Rashi mashakos of Kaiser Beis Yaakov. Rashi emphasizes what it says, so you shall say to the house of Yaakov, Elo hanoshim, these are the women. Only after that it says, you will speak to the Bnei Yisrael shehugdabu hanoshim la'anoshim, that the women were before the men. Shari Indian zeh asiyas hamishkan b'libe kol echad ve'echad hi mitzvah midis. This idea of the spiritual making of the Mishkan within each and every person's heart is a constant mitzvah. It doesn't have a set time, which we know mitzvahs asi shazman grama, women are not obligated. Bedugmas hashesh mitzvahs, similar to the constant mitzvahs, the 6 constant mitzvahs, which is emunah, belief in Hashem, av v'yirah, v'chulu, etc. Love and awe of Hashem. Hamenuyim Taba 518, Hamenuyim Bagdam Sefer HaChinuch. These are enumerated in the introduction to the Sefer HaChinuch. Shem mitzvahs tmidi is that they are constant mitzvahs, and because they are constant mitzvahs, there are no differences between men and women. Therefore, it's understood that they are applicable also for women. That women are ordinarily not obligated in mitzvahs that are time dependent. And to note from what the Rambam writes at the end of the laws of Tshuva, when they teach the women, first we teach them to serve Hashem out of Kabbalah soil and to receive reward. Until their minds increase, and they will have greater wisdom. We reveal to them the secret about serving Hashem for no reward, out of love alone. Ma'at ma'at, little by little, and we accustom them to this in a slow manner, until they comprehend them and they know him from love. We see from this Rambam 2 components. That the above mentioned avodah of both love and awe are, even the love is applicable to women. Through education, the Rambam says, eventually also women can reach the highest, most level of love, similar to Avram, who is called the one that loved Hashem, which is what the Rambam is speaking about over there. How does this fit in with the fact that Chazal usually say in the masculine, within each and every one, echad ve'echad, and not echad ve'achas? Even greater than what the Lashon Chazal using the masculine we find, that when it says those psukim about Aseres HaDibros, I am Hashem, your God, it uses the masculine, and there should be no other gods for you. It's also using the masculine. In addition to it being saying in singular, addressing the single Jew, every Jew individually, they were said in the masculine. Vafel became still in all Haripashut. It's obvious Shakavani Gamla Noshim. Also, women are obligated in the belief of Hashem and not to serve Avodah Zarah. So too in our case, when it says within each and every one, it's also in the feminine, including women. Why the need to emphasize this now? Why in previous generations was this not emphasized, that it's including women? This wasn't emphasized in the Sfarim and Amorim or Rabbeim beforehand. It's because of things of the opposite. Since there are those that say the opposite, as if women are somehow second class, etc., etc., we took upon ourselves, that Rebbe says, talking about himself, to emphasize explicitly that this is applicable to women also. The Rebbe says that my intention is not to say new things over here and to come up with new obligations, etc. That we would hold on to the old things. So I don't want to come up with new things. The whole reason why I'm saying this is to exclude any of the mistakes that people said. The capability to make the mikdash is from Moshe Rabbeinu. Like we read in the following week's parsha, we're going to read it in Mincha of this Shabbos, that you will command the Bnei Yisrael to tzavim lashon, that the tzavos in the word togetherness and joining. Moshe Rabbeinu miskashim kolechad v'ech Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu binds himself with every single yid. Yisayim is even more so. Moshe Rabbeinu atzma kvishu b'kiras ato atzmusa shel Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu himself, the way he's ato you, the very essence of Moshe, who miskashim kolechad v'echad, he binds himself with every single one. V'nois lo'koyach la'avodah da'asli migdash, he gives them the empowerment to do the avodah they should make from a migdash. And action is what's primary. Through that we draw down the third base of Mikdash. It's ready above in the heavens. We draw it down here. We come together to the Holy Land, the holy city of Shalayim, the holy mountain. In the third base of Mikdash, speedily in our days, Mamash.